welcome back to the Mind Vector podcast.
If you're a returning listener and would like to support the podcast, give us a like and a subscribe.
And if you'd like to share your thoughts, leave them on our YouTube, BitChute, or Facebook.
So in our last episode, we touched a little bit on how people today are too wrapped up in seeking meaning in their lives by looking at everything outside of them when they should be really looking within. And we got to talking about a little bit about stoicism and philosophy of loneliness and being alone and being comfortable with it and how it's beneficial.
Yeah, I think there's a lot you can gain by moving into your solitude opposed to moving away from it within reason. Like if, we were also joking about that last episode, don't go out into the woods and die, but don't be so afraid of being Mr. Solo Dolo, as the rap song goes.
Solo Dolo.
Yep.
Not familiar.
Kid Cudi or Cuddy. I forget how to say his name. I'm not hip, but
I'm definitely not.
But
so Solo Dolo is okay.
At least to me, I think being able to appreciate being alone in solitude, I think that can bring you a new level of happiness. And you had brought up a couple concerns that there's risk that you can expose yourself to with that. And you'd also showed me a video that I think I remember watching, but I forgot. But got a chance to rewatch, and we'll post a link to that video in the description on our BitChute and YouTube as well.
Yeah, so like initially I think a lot of people are afraid of being alone. And if you think about it, how often have you truly been alone? Like just by yourself, not interacting with anybody, not even online. Like just you and your thoughts. And personally, I don't think I've ever actually really been alone ever. But
I think that's almost like unfathomable to a girl. So I think that's something that would be probably more of a man issue.
mhm.
And I do think it's good for men to be able to appreciate that solitude because, again, it unlocks a different type of happiness and a different type of peace. But, it's not without its disadvantages, too. So,
Yeah, and I think women definitely tend to stay within their comfort zone of the tribe, and it's a challenge to for someone who's not inclined to naturally want to be alone, but want to be around people to even consider solitude and the benefits. But so yeah, that's like people's initial reaction to the whole premise of being alone is holy shit. But so yeah, when you think about it, how often have you actually been alone with just you and your thoughts? So for me, that's like I don't think I've ever been alone. I've been alone in like as far as not having people around, and I like it because it's peaceful. But I've always had the internet and things distracting me, or projects, or stuff like that. But so once you're actually comfortable being truly alone, there can be some drawbacks to actually coming back into society because then you're comfortable and it's extremely peaceful and there's no noise and there's nothing really standing in your way as far as developing yourself or your if you get into a productive zone. um so then you can become entrenched in wanting to sustain that, but that's not ultimately the goal of it. Is to find yourself, improve yourself, and then reintegrate into, I guess, society, and to be able to bring that benefit in a balanced way.
yeah.
So I mean, you can have periods of solitude that are beneficial, and then but you have to come back to it. You have to come back to society. And it's a tool. It's mostly a tool that you can use that I think has been lost in our culture.
Yeah, and in the last episode, we spoke about how people are using ideology such as politics as a way to fill that hole, and it's probably one of those pitfalls that the intellectuals are more susceptible to, and maybe not because I've seen some dumb shit come up in politics too. Like I saw this video. Basically, it was a Fox excerpt about these kids that had to attend a no, sorry, not kids. These adults that had to attend something in school. It was a LGBTTIA. It was a very long acronym, and it was just like a mouthful of gay. So I don't. I can't remember all of it, but like pansexual, asexual, everything was included in it. So, and it's but anyway, yeah, I think it is something that everybody's using, not just probably people that are more academically inclined or intellectually inclined. I think people do use it in different ways, and same with religion. And like you said, being able to get the benefits of it and then return successfully reintegrated, that's probably the ideal way it should go. Like in Buddhism, I know they used to call Buddha the recluse,
Mm-hmm.
and they would call him by his family name, which was, I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation, Gautama or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
even Buddha, though, like that's one of the more important principles in Buddhism. Like there's three things that they revere the most, at least in the Theravada tradition, and one is the Buddha, um, the Dharma, which is his teachings, and the third is the Sangha, which is basically the community of Buddhists and the monks. So that's kind of what made Buddha a unique Buddha, was that he saw enlightenment, he saw nirvana, and he still came back to share what he'd gained.
Mm-hmm.
So, as far as the benefits, that's even part of why monks aren't allowed to do all these things. They're required to be useful in a way, because if they're useful, the society will give them food when they come around on their alms rounds and everything like that. So, as long as
Mm-hmm.
it's important to provide value to your community and to your society, and
Yeah, they value that.
that's another thing that people like to use to combat uh, solitude or feelings of loneliness. And it's interesting because loneliness is such a growing epidemic in the United States right now. Well,
Mm-hmm.
probably in the Western world, not just limited to the U.S. It's probably just something that's happening in all of Western civilization. So, um, I do think that there is something to be gained from it, but as you said, we experience a lot of artificial connections, which is done through the internet, through telephones, Skype and all of that.
Social media, Facebook, likes, Instagram,
Yeah, it's all done through
everything.
electronics. So except for
Yeah, and
letters, but no one uses letters anymore.
letters. Oh, like writing letters,
Yeah, I guess
pen
unless you
paling.
yeah, unless you got like a sweetheart in jail or something like
Yeah,
that.
stick pen.
Yeah,
Yeah. But that's still, all of that is still like a cheapened version of human interaction, which is what we're neurologically wired to seek out. So we're, in a way, we're settling for a lesser form of that fulfillment as humans.
yeah,
So I actually heard that. I heard Richard Grannon, Spartan life coach. He's on YouTube. He's all over YouTube. But yeah, he's really been hammering that home to people here lately, as far as social media and how it's changing us and creating like a narcissistic society. Or, well, we all have narcissistic tendencies to some degree, but it's being exacerbated through that channel of online interactions. But yeah, going back to what you were saying about loneliness, we're all settling for like a cheapened version of a human interaction, and it's not really a fix.
Yeah, and I think the ideology part of it, there's, I don't know if Socrates actually said this, but then again, there's debates on if Socrates actually existed. But he said something like men who find good women get married, and men who don't, or men who find bad women become philosophers or something like that. So,
You got all kinds of drama to philosophize on.
I mean, a bad relationship can leave you with a lot of wisdom. So,
Yeah.
well, hopefully, that's the ideal, but for a lot of people,
That's life in general.
It's a hamster wheel that they're like, well, time to find the next, the next, train wreck or pre-train wreck to board. But yeah, and I guess one of the potential, there are a couple risks, at least because once you do become more comfortable with solitude, you won't want to return. And I think by wanting to be alone, your personality becomes a little bit more rigid. So, for one, like, if you're somebody that's in their head a lot and you never really express what you're thinking, if you're wrong or a little off about something, you're not putting it out into the world to be filtered. Not to say that, majority is right, but at the same time, sometimes if you can appreciate all the different obstacles as a filter in a way to make the idea clearer, that is one thing that works out, is by kind of exposing the way you think or the way you see certain things. So, and by doing that alone, you can find more people that think similarly, and it may bring the right people to you in its own way. So,
kind of like how we reconnected, because I wouldn't shut the fuck up on Facebook.
yeah. So, like, we went to
Thank you, Facebook.
Yeah, one of our mutual classmates from a long time ago didn't like a meme I posted about the kids in cages story. So he started chiming in, and we started disagreeing and memeing, and kind of realized we were similar, and we were on a similar frequency. So
yeah, and then that kept happening, and we just started chatting, and it went from there.
So being able to kind of put your thoughts out there, that definitely helps if you're in the society where you can do that. But if you're kind of in probably a society that's in flux as far as shifting in a way, it could be a little dangerous. So you might lose your job, or you may get a milkshake to the head, or some type of ridiculousness.
Concrete milkshake.
Yeah, it's very tragic. But
yeah, I think as introverts, we're a little more prone. We might be a little bit more prone to being comfortable with being alone.
Yeah, that's actually another interesting thing too. Our personality types, because a couple days ago I asked you to take. Well, I don't know if that was a week ago, but I asked you.
It's been a few days.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not good with time. I asked you to take the Myers-Briggs test, and it turns out we actually have the same personality type. So
yep.
That's interesting.
It's the same one, but there's different variants within personality types, and we are opposite in the variant part of it. But we have the same personality type, which I'd taken the Myers-Briggs back in college in 20 over a decade ago, and I couldn't remember what I had, so I had to retake it.
You probably.
But yeah.
Do you feel like you were an extrovert back then, or?
No.
No.
I've always been an introvert. Yeah. But I have that balance where I can interact. Like, introvert doesn't mean that you're socially awkward. It just means the way that you recharge. So some people, extroverts, recharge and get energized by being around people, whereas introverts are kind of drained by it, and they need time alone to recharge.
Yeah.
But there's a common misconception that introvert means that you're socially awkward or that you're weird or whatever. But that's not the case. You can be
Yeah.
a well-adjusted introvert. It's just that you just need your space and your alone time to recharge.
Yeah, definitely. And I wonder if part of it too is the people that they have to, like the social pool that they have to pull from. Because if you're around the right people, an INFJ, which is our personality type,
Mm-hmm.
it's nicknamed the counselor, the advocate,
The idealist.
the idealist. Yeah. So for people of our personality type, which is the rarest of the types, and I'm even rarer because apparently it's mostly females that are INFJ. So, yeah, I'm kind of rare being a male INFJ, but it's a lot of uniqueness in me. Libertarian, black, Buddhist, INFJ. But
You're the white squirrel.
pretty much. But for our types, that is something. And it's weird. I always had I wanted more people around, but I was too young to really admit that I just wasn't getting fulfillment out of my relationships, and that's more so what it was.
Yeah.
And there's that danger too. Like if you're kind of stuck in a place of actual loneliness where you're suffering from that disconnect, that's its own kind of hell. And it's a reasonable thing for us to be programmed with genetically, because if you wandered off away from everybody, you get
You're vulnerable.
Yeah, you're vulnerable, and you can get taken by the wolves or whatever location your ancestors evolved from. Or hell, you could just break a limb or something and have a very slow death. Nature has no chill. But
yeah, there's no lonelier person than the one who's surrounded by people and that still feels lonely.
I don't even know if that's I think that's kind of a overused quote.
I think so.
A bit, because even though people are lonely in that way, and even if they're capable of verbalizing that and being conscious of it, they still will benefit from like physical touch and stuff like that. Like
yeah.
In Japan, and I don't know if that's happened in the US yet, I'm sure it is, but I know in Japan I think they have like cuddle bars and shit like that where they pay like cuddle escorts.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I saw one group where it's just a bunch of guys.
I knew that was a thing in like
I'm like
yeah.
whatever floats
At a
your boat.
bar? I've seen that in but it's like in a private setting, like you go and you visit.
Yeah, bar's the wrong word.
The person.
Maybe a brothel would be a better word. Well, maybe not.
Hotel.
Yeah, something like that. A cuddle hotel. That still sounds like a euphemism, but yeah. So there's still like physiological positive benefits to touch and things like that. So that's one thing that that's just kind of something that each individual has to kind of manage, because getting more of it will have an effect on you, even if you are pretty happy with it. So that's why I wouldn't say that maybe they're the loneliest, because if you're somebody that's around a lot of people, or maybe more sexually active or physically active or whatever, you're probably still going to get more physical benefits from that than just being a loner that doesn't have that either. So
yeah, it's something, but I mean that's just like basic level interactions. But I think with the with as far as like someone you can really connect with on an intellectual level and that gets you and that just you just really click with, I think I'm more talking about that aspect, because you can have just any warm body around and that's only gonna suffice for so long.
I don't know. Maybe this is the male female difference here, but I don't know. I could do with having a warm female body on my bed. If there's no emotional connection, I think that would be better opposed to nothing. But yeah, I get that.
Well, taking it to the next level is what I mean. It's like somebody that gets you.
Yeah, to have like that full.
That's rare.
That full tiered complementary relationship. So
yeah,
and that's extremely rare. And that's another thing that INFJs are kind of prone to is that they want to pull substance out of everything and out of their relationships as well. And if they
Hmm.
can't find that, it's like talking to a bunch of ghosts, basically.
Yeah, it's like you would rather not bother
Yeah.
with small talk and just like little shit.
So, and that's kind of one of the dangers of becoming comfortable with it is that I guess people can start to perceive you as kind of arrogant.
Yeah.
And I guess another thing too that kind of really gets bad if you're getting to a point where you're improving in certain ways, you can kind of become more critical of people. Like you can see one bit of information about them and get you're able to kind of pull more data from that one data point.
Mm.
So because of that, you may end up not wanting to be around them, which people would say you're arrogant, you're judgmental, all these things. Which that is stuff that INFJs get accused of being, which is cold and critical and things like that.
Maybe it's because I'm a girl, but nobody's ever said that to me. I think I get away with a lot more
I've been
than probably a guy would,
I've been called
especially in today's
arrogant
feminist
and cold
fucking.
before, but I think I'm pretty down to earth.
Yeah. Yeah, you're pretty grounded. But I think in today's feminist culture, it's more, I can get away with more than you
Yeah, that's
as far
true.
as not being called arrogant and whatnot.
I'm lucky that I'm black, so I can say whatever. And if someone called me a white supremacist, this
Pull
is
the black card,
yeah, you just
pull the
laugh.
race card.
So,
Yeah.
but it's yeah. So I guess those are some of the drawbacks, but at the same time, I guess it depends. Every individual has to judge it for themselves. Like, what quality of people are they willing to settle for? And if you're living a life where you're not exposed to new people regularly, that's when picking friends or even mates and things like that can become more problematic.
Yeah.
Especially if you want that type of thing. So,
Well, for us, it's more about quality over quantity as far as friendships and talking to
yeah,
people. And it's
yeah,
like we'd rather have just one or two solid people that we, come to as far as that and connect with than like a dozen or whatever, like superficial friendships.
yeah, definitely. Like, whenever someone on Facebook has like 900 friends, I'm like,
I don't understand that. How does
yeah,
that?
I'm like, okay,
Why?
so all these relationships are jokes. But
I used to get so jealous, like when I was a kid in
yeah, I
like
did too.
elementary school. Did you really?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and like
used
I
to
had a
wrestle
best
with the
friend.
loneliness thing so badly, but go on.
Yeah, I had like a best friend, and then like if any other like girl came around or whatever, and then suddenly she was a best friend too, I was like, felt automatically like a slap in the face. Like, oh hell no! I was so jealous. I was such a jealous little friend.
When it came to being jealous friend wise, I never dealt with that. Like growing up, my best friend he was gay, so
Hmm. Oh.
yeah, I'm also safe from being called homophobic. But I mean, we disagree a lot now because we're opposite politically, but we still try to talk. I kind of miss that we can't go into depth about certain things because the way we fundamentally look at the world is different
Mm.
now. But um, yeah,
So, but that goes back to like
he
having
he was
that
super
deep
social. He was
connection.
a like for him he was a ENFJ,
Mm.
and it's basically our type except they recharge from being around people.
Right.
So it used to like be like alien to me to see how many people he could you know how he could interact with people just easily.
Yeah.
Whereas with me, it was something I felt like it was like I had to force myself to do it until I actually got to know them.
Right.
So there's like actually a word for that where you feel frustrated by not knowing somebody yet.
Hmm.
So I forgot what that word was. I saw it once online, but yeah, and like him, he had a lot of people that he considered best friends as well, and I never really got jealous about it because I was kind of similar. Like the people I considered best friends, it always kind of rotated. So
Hmm.
now that I'm older, I think it's kind of a meaningless term, so I don't really think about it too much. I know which one of my friends I'm close to, and I gauge them well enough to know what I can trust them with and what I can expect from them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think I was just like kind of putting all my eggs in one basket and then just having that relying on that deep connection with that person when they weren't it wasn't necessarily that way for them, they could have more friends and whatnot. And I guess I didn't get the concept back then, but yeah.
yeah, and that's actually how I got into Buddhism, is because I got deeper into it once I ran into a situation with two of my best friends at the time, because I didn't know that one was dating the other, and me and her messed around a bit. So we kind of found ourselves in a Lori Shane situation, or a Lori Shane Rick situation. So luckily nobody died, so that's that worked out well. But I I think the whole thing though, it did help me kind of learn to turn inward, and it also created space for more people, and people of a different quality, so that my thinking could change. And
Right.
it led to me being, a lot happier than I thought I would ever be when I was a younger, like a 19-year-old or something like that. So
Yeah, because it's not easy to change a circle of people. It's like that's never gonna happen. So you're just stuck there. You gotta withdraw.
that, and like being able to learn to burn bridges, like
Right.
that's another thing that I learned to appreciate, because there's always that taboo if you're the one who walks away, like like you're the one that's giving up on the relationship, but the other person is just kind of willing to say whatever sounds nice, so you look like the
Mm.
asshole.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I was just kind of ghosted. I never said nothing. I never said anything. I never said bye. It's over. Kind of stopped.
with yeah, with people that were close to me, if it got to a point where it's like, yeah, we don't want the same things, like I'm out. So I kind of learned to appreciate that about myself, and essentially probably something that, going to another ideology here in the zodiac world. I'm an Aquarius, so they say that that's one thing that Aquarius wrestle with, is a constant feeling of loneliness, and part of it is because they're good at being fairly objective,
Mm.
so they don't really have that culture or
You're not
group
into your
thinking.
emotions.
Yeah, not into your emotion, and you're not like embodied in how everybody else thinks around you. So you can kind of realize that everybody's like role playing in a way. So it's a
Yeah.
little empty to you. But they say that once Aquarius has learned to be alone, like that's one of the best ways that they can kind of restore their sense of power, which is good, because once you learn how to burn bridges, you start walking away from bad relationships.
Yep.
So, and leads to another quote. Like I've mentioned before, one of my favorite characters in The Walking Dead. There's a scene that plays with. There's a song that plays when he's having a scene where he's having to make a choice about the future, and that song, the lyrics say something to the effect of, "My peace has always depended on the ashes in my wake," and fucking love that.
Mm.
So I
Love it.
noticed as I got older, the more bridges I learned to burn with bad family and weaker relationships, the more liberated I felt. So, but again, there's dangers of enjoying that too much, because,
Yeah. You can't stagnate. You gotta keep moving.
yeah, you gotta find more people. So, or at least, you don't want to be too alone, because you put yourself at different risk then, because let's say let's say you're old and you fall and you don't have life alert. The cat isn't gonna be able to call 911. They're just gonna be like, oh, okay, so I'll give it a bit and dinner will be
Man,
ready.
let me see what these eyeballs taste like.
Pretty much.
Yeah. We're also very private as INFJs.
I was
Like
always the
we ha
opposite. That was one
Really?
thing that was different about me, is that I was open book, and
You're an open book.
one of my close
I'm
friends now, he
very
says
private.
that I have a tendency to overshare.
Oh
So
wow. You blarper.
I wouldn't say it's emotional all the time, but it may just be more than I really need to say. Hey,
Mm.
that got me into a weird situation at work once. Because, like, I used to work crazy hours when I was at this one job doing surveillance. When I worked there, I think I got 96 hours in 1 week. So,
God damn. Yeah, I remember that.
yeah. And I got to a point where I literally fell asleep at the at the desk.
Well, how do you know that wasn't just like sleep deprivation? Because your brain will go, you kind of go crazy when you don't get enough sleep.
One of my coworkers actually told me that, and somebody
Yeah.
else at the job told me that too. It's like you shouldn't be working this much because it's gonna
Yeah, it does affect.
it's gonna
Sleep
affect
is
you.
really, yeah. But no, I did notice that when we first started kind of chatting, that you were a pretty open book as far as your personal life and stuff.
Yeah, but
And which
it's
for me, it actually takes a long time to open up to people. Like I'm just more of like a receiver of information. I'm a good listener,
I think for us though,
but
like they say INFJs kind of always wind up in a situation where they'll just run up to people and they'll just start sharing their personal life with them.
the other people share with us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and since we're both kind of INFJs and I have that tendency, I think it kind of just created a feedback loop, so it worked out in a good way.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, normally I'm like really private and like at least if I'm more discerning about who I talk to and what I say and who I can trust. But that could also probably be because I've been like burned before.
Yeah, I have too, and
Oh.
for me at least, the things I learned was some basically I don't know I don't know if it's like shamelessness or what, but it's like there's nothing really too bad that they can do with what I'm telling them. So you ever seen 8 Mile?
Yes.
At the end where Eminem basically just he's just realistic about himself. So it's like whatever the other dude has to say, it doesn't matter that much. And the guy's like, well, yeah, and he just chokes. So after you've gotten hardened a bit by being okay with losing people, if they're disrespectful with anything you tell them, it's like, oh, okay, well, you suck ass. I don't want to deal with that. So you just leave. So I guess that's why it was easier for me to open up about um, things like that.
Yeah, I think generally we try to go for like more authentic people as opposed to superficial masked types trying to front.
Yeah,
But as far as like the private and being an open book, we like I said before, we have different subtypes in our personality. So your assertive type is less likely to care about what other people think, whereas my type, the turbulent type, is more. I'm more inclined to be a little more influenced by what I think others may think of me. So that's why I. That's probably why I'm so private, because like I'm kind of tiptoeing around that
mm-hmm.
perception, though presenting what I present. But I do have times where I'm like, I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah,
And I think that's come with age too. I was a lot more careful before, and now it's more so because of family. Um, like I have kids to think about and stuff now, so it's like kind of a security issue. But as far as what people think of me personally, I'm like, whatever. I've had 2 kids. You can't hurt me. You can't
so
hurt me any more than they are over. Oh, shit.
so yeah, and being on the opposite side where you're yearning for it and it's causing a lot of suffering, that can warp your personality in a lot of bad ways. So in the video that you showed me, the guy mentions a quote by this dude who wrote a book called Denial of Death, and the author is called Ernest Becker. He says that if a person becomes God, they can easily become the devil.
Mm.
So if you're dealing with some type of emptiness and you're trying to use people to fill that hole, giggity, then if you're trying to use people to fill that hole, um, you can end up worshiping them in a way. And
Right.
that's actually an interesting concept too, because Jesse Lee Peterson said something to a similar effect, and he says that's one mistake that men make is that they put their female partner above God, and if they,
Ooh.
you know, he's a Christian, so that's how his ideology works. But there's still wisdom in that statement, though. If you end up putting the other person too high, when they mess up, they're going to be the devil to you, and that's actually something you see that's common in borderline personality disorders, that they go through the cycle of idealizing someone and then instantly devaluing them once they fall off the pedestal. So another issue with yearning it too much is that you'll do anything to keep people around, so you can lose your soul that way. You can lose what makes you you, or you can wind up basically surrounded by people that don't share the same values, and you're just trying to keep up. So you can become fake, and that's something that people that are highly agreeable would be prone to. So,
Yeah, when I was younger, I was, and I hate to say it, but it was family that I was like hanging out with a lot. And then I think once I started college, it was like, it's gonna sound arrogant, but I felt like I didn't really, we didn't really share anything in common. It was just to fill the space or whatever. But they're not the kind of people that I would really associate with anymore.
What was college the issue? Was it because you had the option to be away from them, or did you just
Yeah.
feel like they were dum-dums?
Yeah, it was well, a little bit of both after a
According
point.
to Patrice O'Neal, that one
It's like
episode.
I outgrew them as far as intellect and whatnot, because they didn't go to college. They just kind of they toyed with it, but they're not the intellectual types anyway. But yeah, distance definitely was a facilitator. So after that, I just didn't really have an interest in maintaining friendship or
Bad
family or anything.
relationships.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like why?
yeah, because once you get that taste, it's like
And I did.
you have
I
something to
had
compare
a
it
little
to.
bit of, yeah, I had a little bit of guilt about it for a while, like for a long time, because we all have kids now, and it's like the kids have never met. You know, they've never hung out or partied or whatever. Had go to the little birthday parties, and they would invite us, but I was just like, I don't want to be around them. You know, it's like part of it was dredging up old memories, and I didn't want to rehash anything, and just why. I'm over it. I'm done. You know, so.
Yeah, from listening to Stefan Molyneux's podcast, that was something that really resonated with me, was when he was able to very eloquently verbalize that you're not the problem if you don't want to be around people that are abusive or not, you know, you're not on the same vibe with,
Right.
because you're only hurting yourself, and it's not fair to yourself. You know, you have to practice some degree of self of self-love. So
Right. Yeah,
yeah,
don't put up with cringe.
yeah. And unfortunately, like, honestly, it's such a weird thing, because people are like, you know, they get really defensive if you talk about having bad family and having to get away from them. And I'm not sure what that is that triggers people, because, you know, he gets the reputation, the false reputation as a cult leader because of it. So
Stefan does.
yeah, there's a lot of people that cult man bad, basically. So so with that, and I always think that comes from a place of either it's a shitty person that knows that they're shitty to some degree, and they're afraid that someone else can figure it out and they may leave them too. Like, it kind of lifts up the curtain on what their game is, because there's no reason to say that, to get anxiety if someone says that they don't want to be around abusive people, you know.
Oh, yeah. Because then that kind of puts a mark on them, like, right? Like, oh, this person no longer wants to associate with this person. There must be something wrong with them,
Yeah.
with whoever.
So
And I mean, people kind of know when there's a person that's not. But if it's a whole circle, then you're the outcast for leaving.
yeah, I mean, I experienced that when I was in that Rick Shane Lloyd situation. At the time, we were a pretty close circle of like 6 people, and I had two of them tell me, it's like, well, if if you stop talking to them, how do I know you're not gonna stop talking to me?
Yeah.
So, it was. I didn't really say anything at the time, but I knew that that was the wrong answer, basically. I'm like, okay, well, that's they're giving me a red flag, regardless of if they realize it or not. So I always kind
Yeah.
of gauge people by the information, because people will tell you a lot that will let you know what they're going to be capable of. So
Yep.
if
But we
people,
ignore those red flags just to have someone to hang out with.
yeah, and
Ay.
see, and that's the other thing too. That's kind of why it's harder for me to want to just be social for the sake of being social, because I feel like I could easily kind of slip into something that's not that's not healthy, where I just
That's
start.
not for you.
Well, worse than that, I could habitualize making people objects of utility rather than people, if that
Mm,
makes sense.
you
So
psychopath.
yeah, basically,
Sociopath.
yeah. So
Yeah.
you could just kind of see that, oh, this girl's not that bright, and she's a little different than me, but she's kind of cute, so I'm gonna say whatever to get in her pants. So there's that part
Yeah.
of it, which it's a dangerous road to go down, because you start doing those things, it becomes easier and easier and easier, and before you know it, you're not who you want to be.
Yeah. It's sticky. It's sticky.
So, and I think that's kind of especially like being impressionable. Like, I know girls are more prone to that since they tend to be more agreeable, because by nature that's just how we bred them. So, speak about people just too
The
too matter of fact.
socialization.
But
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, going back to it being hard for people to detach themselves from family or stop in associating for family. There's the social reinforcement. Like if you tell somebody that I'm not talking to my mom, they'll go and they'll say, "But it's your mom. It's your mom. It's your brother. Oh, it's your father. Whoever." There's that like backlash of there's something wrong with you. But I mean, I don't believe in that blood is thicker than water kind of thing. That whole mentality, bad people, a bad person is a bad person, and a, a lot of times that's family, and because of that whole stigma of striking out against it, it's like it oftentimes will keep people in a situation that they really need to get out of, because yeah, it's hurting you, and then you end up feeling stuck, and then you start doing things to alleviate that, and that can also be self-destructive.
yeah, and a lot of people, they're not mindful enough to really look at their behaviors to see if they're using people in a certain way. Like, they'll just do it unconsciously, or just more
Yeah.
out of habit. So when you try to bring that to light with them, they'll just look at you like you have two heads or something like that.
Well, it's a common thing for a parent to use a child that way, like in a parent child dynamic, even after they're grown, because the kid doesn't have a choice.
Yeah, the
The
kids are
kid,
kind of held hostage.
yeah. So I think parents need to be especially mindful of the way that they essentially objectify their kids. And I don't mean that like in a sexual way, just like
Well, don't do that
seeing
either.
them. No, don't do that either. That's not good. Uh, but just using them as like therapists, friends, tell all your secrets to and all your traumas. And it's like no, you have to be mindful of and see them as a potential grown-up adult and respect them even when they're little,
Yeah,
because that
definitely.
can have some real detrimental effects on them mentally.
See, and I think the fact that a lot of people aren't capable of having like those connections, like beyond the the physiological, plug and play. Since most relationships aren't much more than that with us, it it makes it hard for people to communicate. So they don't really know how to take criticism, and if their kid starts doing it, they can respond with just further shitty behavior towards the kid, because they never ran into a situation where they had to change themselves or be more self-aware. So
Yeah, and the parent child dynamic is such that parent says jump, you jump.
Yeah,
So there's like that power that they hold power over you.
yeah. Because if the
Um,
kid's not agreeable, then back in the day, you could just leave them outside of the tribe for the bears. So
yeah. And there's a psychological like phenomena dynamic thing that occurs even like if you're grown and you've been away from home for, say 5 years or so, and then you come back home and you visit, that you kind of regress a little bit in that moment just based on their dynamic with you because they're always going to see you as the child or whatever. So then they start treating you like a kid and then you like kind of automatically start responding in that way unless you're mindful of it and you like suppress it and act differently. But there's always that like instinct that kicks in.
yeah,
So it's hard. It's hard to get away from it.
it's true, and that's kind of why mindfulness is so important because those situations they add up, and you're basically training people how to treat you. So
Right.
if you allow it, and then one day you're like, no more, they're just gonna be like, what are you talking about? So it's not
Yeah,
something you.
parents are hard to retrain.
Yeah. So if they're like emotionally absent from you, then put them in the old folks' home.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but it is interesting how like the social repercussions and caring what people think. Like it's understandable why it's ingrained in us, like at a biological level. Even in Buddhism, I heard a monk tell a story about how they noticed that these monks that were like in mountains, away from the rest of the village, they would talk occasionally, and then they would talk about concerns that people would think this or that about them, and they hadn't been outside of the monastery. Well, they hadn't returned to the town for more than alms for like 10 years,
Mm.
and it's like
So they were out of touch.
it's kind of a weird thing. It's like these people in a mountain who don't see these people anymore. They're not a part of their life. They're still concerned about what people think, and that's how deep that behavior goes in people.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I have a little bit of a criticism about the Buddhists just being away for so long and being in like their own little bubble of happiness. Because it's like, who are you to just like up and leave this wreck? And I don't know. It's weird.
that's actually what the figure that's similar to the devil asked Buddha right at the end before his enlightenment. It's like, who are you? And Buddha said, I'm the awakened one. And he said, who
Ooh.
gives you the authority? And then he like taps the earth, and he's like, the earth has witnessed it. That's why you always see.
Ah.
But and that's kind of the crazy thing about the good and evil dynamic. That's not really the same in Buddhism, because over there in that ideology, it's more about attachment. Because those are what lead you to do evil most of the time. Um,
Yeah, but
so
aren't go ahead.
basically, that figure is more so trying to keep you in the wheel of rebirth, to keep you in the game, to keep the delusion going.
Mm,
So, but like I said, though, Buddha designed the monastic code in a way to where monks couldn't be islands. They have
right.
to still rely on people to keep them fed, because they have to walk around
Oh,
in robes, and the only way they can eat is if they have their bowl filled.
I
And
see.
if people don't do it for them, then they can't cultivate the land. They can't kill anything. So
So he like built in like a codependence still to kind of keep them involved in society
I've
based
al-
around
I've
the
always kind of
rule.
wrestled with the idea of codependence. What is it? How would you define that?
Well, just like I don't know, like a symbiotic kind of thing whereby they provide wisdom because they have this detached perspective to help people in their daily lives. And I mean, symbiotically, the people are repaying them with nurturing them.
Okay. Yeah, I would say symbiotic would probably be a better word.
Yeah,
When I hear
yeah, that's a better
codependence,
term.
I always think of like a disorder, because that was a thing for a
Yeah.
while. People said you could get addicted to relationships. I think that's what
Hmm.
codependence is. So,
Yeah.
which,
Yeah, symbiotic. So he built in like a symbiotic set of rules for them to live by with so that they're still involved in
yeah,
society. Because I was like, well, if all the monks are leaving, like they're abandoning the struggle of life, and then telling people how to live life, how to be above the struggle. But it seems like hypocritical to me a little bit.
yeah. Well, it's not that way. It's not designed where they're supposed to
Mm,
be away from everybody because they're supposed to
mm,
come back to people. But
gotcha.
some people, once they hit their enlightenment, they choose not to. Some they go back and they want to share what they learned. So they call the ones that hit it and don't want to quit it. The ones that hit enlightenment and just quit the entire game. Those are called private Buddhas, so
Mm.
or arahants. The ones that hit it and they're like, I'm gonna stay a little longer to teach everybody else to share what I've learned. Those are the bodhisattvas. So
Ugh. Sometimes I wonder if like I ever like took off and just went off by myself if I would miss anybody. Like would I really miss anybody? I don't know.
I don't know. It's hard to say, especially with the internet too, because now I'm gonna quote Star Wars with the internet, and nobody's ever really gone. You can look up a lot of people from your past now. So
Yeah, if I go away, I'm like leaving it all.
you cut the internet too.
Yeah, I'd have to cut it. I mean, that's the key, right? Because it's in your pocket.
That's true. Was that
You're always
temptation?
connected. So that would have to go.
Yeah, and another thing too that people say causes the fear of being alone is people don't want to be alone with themselves. And
Yeah.
when I was younger, that was something that kind of I couldn't really understand because like, well, you're always with yourself. What do you mean? But it's more so that your mind can do some bad things, and it's because you haven't learned how to exist with your mind.
Right.
So if your
I
mind
get
has a tendency to go through bad thoughts, to put a negative spin on everything, then it takes a while to talk to it, so it's not doing that anymore.
But if you're completely alone, then there's nothing for your mind to like react to in a negative way. That's where I get my peace. It's like if I didn't have this, and this going on feeding into my brain for my brain to go into that negative mode. Because I do have a lot of like negative thinking tendencies. But without that constant stimulation and testing you to be able to correct it, then is that really actually challenging you to grow in a solitary state? My guess is no, because you're not getting any feedback. You're just kind of with your own thoughts. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
So
if
it's not like a actual I mean, you can run the simulation in your head and what you would do, but it's all just kind of it's a simulation. It's not the
that's
real
a
deal.
thought exercise.
Yeah.
That's see, and I think that's kind of what disappoints me about that whole situation where they banned prisoners from learning about meditation because it's really interesting because solitary confinement is considered torture by some, and they do that to inmates. But other inmates, if they're like don't want to deal with the threat of being around all these other violent people, they want to be in solitude. So
Right.
meditation gives you that ability to have something to work at and to constantly see failures of the mind, to always be able to learn to
To
cope,
regulate it.
to
Yeah.
cope with the swings of it. So
Yeah.
there is that
Always.
benefit of being out there. If you go out and you don't have the negative thoughts, you're fine. But if you go out there, you have to learn how to deal with them, or you. That's a dark joke, but you wind up in the suicide tree in Japan, forest in Japan. So, hopefully you figure out something that makes it more bearable. Um,
Yeah, have you ever watched Survivor Man?
no, I know what show
I
that
think
is. I never watched it really.
I think it was on like National Geographic. It was just this guy that would go out into like the deepest of wildernesses and just see how long he could survive. And there was this one where I think he was in Alaska and he was out there for about 3 months just by himself. And like they drop him off with like minimum supplies. So he has to hunt and forage and build a shelter and all that stuff and just be out there in the wilderness. And I think that might have been like one of the longest stretches that he did being out in the wilderness. And he was like, they put him out there with a camera. So he's like recording himself and setting up all the angles and then taking footage and like everything. So he's out there completely alone.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask, because I know there were
And
two shows like
filming.
that, and there was
Yeah.
one where there was a crew, and there was one with the dude setting the cameras himself.
No, this guy was by himself. It's Survivor Man. I think you're thinking maybe of Bear Grylls.
Yeah,
Because
that
he would
sounds
like
right.
talk to the camera and like interact and whatever. And like demo whatever he was doing. So he was talking to somebody out there. He wasn't alone. But this guy was alone. And it was really interesting to watch because you could just see him kind of starting to go nuts.
Really?
And then yeah, he was just kind of, I mean, he still had to talk to the camera and like it was a little bit like blogging.
It's like a
But
nature vlog.
you could kind of see him how kind of starting to deteriorate mentally. And then when they finally picked him up, he was like crying, like tears of joy because he was so lonely out there.
That's pretty
So,
sad. That's unfortunate.
I mean, I'm sure it was okay at first, but 3 months, damn.
Yeah. I wonder.
So it makes me curious to see how.
So, yeah, I mean, I wonder, like, what's the longest people can go? There was a experiment that a friend of mine mentioned to me that I didn't have a chance to look up, but it was these babies that were raised without interacting with people. I forgot how they did it, but
Holy shit.
yeah, I forgot where it was. I didn't get a chance to look it up, but when he mentioned it, I wrote it down somewhere so I can go back and look into it later to see how they turned out. But they were all kinds of messed up because they didn't have human interaction at a young age. So,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you babies require some type of, affection in order to survive. So,
They need so much. There's so much that they need.
so yeah, like I don't know what the cap is before people can go out alone like that without it breaking them in some way, and I don't know what's on the other side of that break. Maybe it's like horrible, or maybe it's enlightenment. Who knows?
It
But
depends on what you bring into it.
I know Buddha he went out there for 40 days and 40 nights just to meditate alone. That's always that's a theme in Christianity too, the number 40.
Yeah.
So
Right.
start going up the numerology tree.
Oh
That's another ideology to get lost in.
God. I think that's just patterns. The brain will automatically pick up on patterns just where it sees it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still interested in just kind of seeing what bits of truth are in it. With that one, who knows? It could just be more psychological how people react to numbers. Like they do with colors. People react to colors that are intellectually stimulating or make them hungry. So numbers could have emotions associated with them. Maybe it's like like some type of what do they call that? Where your mind confuses senses, like synesthesia or something like that.
Yeah, synesthesia.
Yeah.
There was actually a guy, he was like super, I think he was like super autistic, that he actually said that numbers provoked emotion for him. Like just seeing a number, he would get different feelings from them. Like seeing the number 3 would make him happy, or seeing that there were some numbers that he really didn't like number 7 or something. It was crazy. But he could like do like crazy equations in his head, like just on the fly.
Yeah.
And like he had perfect recall and just really super just a super brain of a guy. I don't remember what his name was. But yeah, feelings.
So
Feelings and numbers.
yeah. So, and again, like that's one of the best things about meditation. It gives you something to do with the solitude and a way to work on yourself. So I think that that's something that can be beneficial if prisoners actually had a chance to learn that. They would probably be a lot less miserable. Unfortunately, if they had it beforehand, they probably wouldn't have You know,
Right.
if they're in there for a real crime, like an actual victimizing crime, they probably wouldn't have gone that route. But
So if you had to run a prison, you'd make that a requirement.
yeah, I mean,
Put that in there. Throw it in there as an option.
yeah, I would. I mean, it's a prison, so they've kind of been stricken of their rights at that point. So
Yeah.
that's
I mean,
kind
what
of,
else do they have to do?
yeah. So
I don't know. A lot of them are getting
kind of,
out with like master's degrees and shit.
yeah. Well, you got to make sure
Law degrees, basically.
for the ones that aren't, though. You know,
Yeah.
if you can give them a chance to kind of reset things and then build up from there, give like a more solid foundation, I think it would help.
Yeah.
Because some prisons they do the Christian thing, which you know that can help too. But I feel like it's a little. There's a lot more. There's more roads to get lost down on that one. I think with teaching the meditation, it's just straightforward. It's less confusing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, are these thoughts or is this God? You know. So when you're dealing with when you phrase the world in terms of spirits versus thoughts, you know, there's a lot of different paths you can take with that with those different perspectives.
Yeah, and I feel like with Christianity, there's like a lot of shame-based, kind of like training. Like, I don't know. It's like it's just shame-based to get you to behave, whereas Buddhism is just like it's stripped of all that.
Yeah.
It's just straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, you could make the argument too that the boogeyman in Buddhism is karma, but if you don't mystify karma, it still holds up in a secular sense that actions have consequences. So, and if you don't think that there's, you know, if you don't see the tie between, if you don't believe in causality, then you probably got some really fucked up issues there. So,
Yeah, people are still gonna kind of pick and choose what they want to glean from it all.
so another thing that, you know, going back to that Socrates quote about if you are in solitude, one way to enjoy it is that you can find something that you are passionate about or that you are interested in. So that kind of helps too, and I think that's why ideology is what people turn to. There's different ways to describe it. Like in Buddhism, they call it absorption or concentration. Like that state gives you peace. In Taoism, they call it a state of flow or wu-wei. So in the video that the guy linked, he said that someone said that they achieved their self-realization by just diving into work. So they dove into whatever their passion was.
Yeah, we got a lot of workaholics in this world.
So
Which, I mean, it's productive, but I mean, that's not really a balanced approach to life.
yeah, it's not. So and sometimes I wonder too if we're just like meant to be different. Well, we are meant to all be different things, because they say that that's kind of where the archetype of the shaman comes in, is the person who goes out into the wild, into the unknown, alone. Then they come back and they teach. I think Alan Watts Alan Watts has referenced that. I think it's also something Carl Jung brought up as well. But
Yeah. And then you have the night owls that were the watchmen of the village,
yeah,
just because they were naturally up at that time, and so that's what they did.
looks like we're coming up on the 1 hour mark, so we're gonna go ahead and close out this episode. If we thank you for spending your time with us. If you found value and would like to support the podcast, give us a subscribe and a like, and leave your thoughts in the comment section on our YouTube, BitChute, or our Facebook.
Oh, and follow us on social media. We're on Instagram and Twitter, and you said Facebook.
Yeah, I just said Facebook.
What else are we on? We're on all the stuff.
Yeah.
Check us out.